And I want to again welcome Cayman and all of our press corps to this week's press briefing. And we do have a lively press corps today, and I'm very glad that we do. And as far as our ministry is concerned, it's been an exciting week for us. Today, I'm happy to report that we started the planning session for a 5-year strategic plan for UCCI. I think everyone in the country knows and understands the outstanding work that has gone into UCCI. We've stabilized the institution. As you can recall, 4 years ago, it was rocked by the Said fiasco that occurred under the then Minister, Alden McLaughlin, and the PPM government. However, and upon the appointment of Mr. Roy Borden, we were able to not only stabilize the institution, but offer it real credible leadership under Ms. Berna Murphy Cummins as the chair of the Board of Governors. I can say that not only have we raised academic standards and not only have our students risen to the occasion and our average GPA is significantly improved, but we've had numerous programs started, like the bachelor's in nursing, the new Teach Cayman initiative, many new initiatives. At this stage, we felt it was time now for the institution to basically gather its collective breath and now really focus on how we would strategically plan the way forward and what UCCI would look like. I'm happy to say that the president of the Bermuda College, Dr. Green, is actually leading the sessions and the exercises that's going to happen over the next 2 days. That's going to lay the foundation, and then coming out of that will be the 5-year strategic plan for UCCI. I also just want to say how happy we are in the ministry that once again the Cayman Islands Early Years Association, our schools, our Early Years Unit have greatly contributed to a joint initiative that is Week of the Young Child Week, and participated in a way that's very meaningful. I know Mr. Seymour is going to add a lot more from his ministry's perspective in terms of the work that they do in this area. Just want to publicly thank all of our celebrity readers who went into schools across Grand Cayman yesterday. I know our children greatly enjoyed it. It gave me great pleasure to be able to go up to Sir John Campbell Primary School and read to one of our new reception classes that was introduced this year. And that was a great experience for me. Also great to obviously interact with children that age. Also just want to thank all those who were involved from the early years, the Cayman Islands Early Years Association, its president, Ms. Rena Jefferson, and all of the activities that they organized, the pajama parties, etc., for our very youngest children. As you know, and everyone knows, they are our most precious resource, and we cannot invest too much money in our children. The dividends will pay off down the line. At this stage, I would hand over to Minister Scotland.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Excuse me this morning if I have a little bug in my throat. I'm trying to fight off a flu. I wanted to just echo the sentiments of the Deputy Premier in terms of the Celebrity Reader Program. I too had the opportunity for several years now to participate in that program, and was very proud to be able to go and read to several classes yesterday morning at Savannah Primary School. And so I just want to add it as well how impressed I am with I read to the reception year and took the opportunity not only to read to them but also to find out, to ask them some questions and also see where they are in terms of their advancement. I was very impressed, and only want to commend again the Minister for the efforts in this regard over the last few years in terms of the early childhood, and especially with the putting back the reception years in the primary schools. And like I said, that program has been exceptionally well over the last few years, and again, very proud to be part of that Celebrity Reader Program. I want to also plug another excellent initiative that's going to be happening very soon. It's an initiative by the Lions Club, which is the PACE initiative. There was a press conference here earlier this week to launch that. It's a run and walk, which is in early June, in commemoration of the Delno Hislop, who was a former Lions Club member that passed away some years ago from cancer. And PACE is an initiative which recognizes and promotes awareness and education about colon and prostate cancer. And this year they have as their spokesperson the president of the University College, Mr. Roy Bodden, who himself is a cancer survivor. And there was an excellent story in the newspaper yesterday or today, I believe, which covered that press conference. And I want to encourage the public to participate in that event and sponsors to come on board and support that event in aid of raising funds to fight and to bring awareness about colon and prostate cancer. I want to go on now to an announcement regarding a memorandum of understanding which has been signed between the government and CONCACAF, which is the governing body for football for the North American, Central American, and Caribbean region, which we know that our very own Mr. Jeff Webb is the president of that confederation. And so we've been in discussions for some while, and Cabinet recently approved a memorandum of understanding between CONCACAF and the government to approve further discussions towards an agreement. And some of the objectives in that memorandum, which we discussed for the agreement, include CONCACAF establishing their headquarters and principal place of business here in the Cayman Islands, and certainly what opportunities that can provide to advance the stature of football and sports in Cayman in general. We want to also continue discussions about affording the Cayman Islands to be the host country for a number of CONCACAF events, including annual conferences and congresses and so on, and also hosting sports tourism events and so on, games and otherwise. And we also talked about it'll also discuss opportunities that CONCACAF can provide the Cayman Islands to benefit from extensive free media coverage in conjunction with their events, which are hosted here in Cayman. We also provides for discussions about developing scholarship and specialized training programs for people here in the Cayman Islands, with the objective of enhancing football in general and our national team specifically in football, and also about to continue discussions also because CONCACAF already has a number of persons employed right here in the Cayman Islands since Mr. Webb has become the president. And so we will continue discussions about how many more persons can be employed here in Cayman, either persons from here or other persons coming into work as well, and obviously the opportunities that provides. And also, as I said, one of the key points in the discussions for the final agreement would be, as I said, CONCACAF establishing their operations here. So an MOU which has a potential for some excellent things for here for the Cayman Islands, and obviously the discussions will continue towards finalizing an agreement. But the MOU has been approved by Cabinet, and a team now from government together with CONCACAF will discuss this towards finalizing an agreement.
Thank you very much, Minister Scotland. Minister Seymour.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. And I too want to say that I was a part of the Celebrity Reader program yesterday at the Bordentown Primary School in year 2, and was able to read a book called Ella, the Elegant Elephant. And it was such a joy to do that. And definitely the children really appreciated it. They didn't want me to leave. They actually held on to me. And so special. I hope I get to do it very soon again. And I want to thank all the teachers and persons who organized this event. And we need to continuously show that we care for these children and students. Today's message I have today is about Child Month 2013, and I have a message. I am happy to announce that this May is the 17th annual observance of Child Month in the Cayman Islands. The theme this year is Care, Advocate, and Protect. Our children deserve lives filled with love, nurturing, caring, protection, and opportunities to succeed. Child Month is about advocating on behalf of our children to ensure that they have a safe, healthy, and enjoyable childhood. This year, the Department of Children and Family Services has organized many fun and informative activities in partnership with various government and non-government agencies. The month-long celebration will commence with Celebrity Reading Day on May 1st, when various persons, including myself, will participate in reading for children in preschools across the island. This will be followed by the annual church service to be held this year at the Emsley Memorial Church on Sunday, 5th of May. During the service, the 2013 Child Month Award will be presented to a recipient who has contributed extensively to children in the Cayman Islands. There will be an all-island dress down day on Friday, the 10th of May, where all donations will go to Feed Our Future to support their school lunch program. The rest of the activities during the month have a strong emphasis on the Children's Law 2012 revision, to build awareness about the law and on the issue impacting our children. The public can gain full access of the children's law and regulations in the document library on our website, www.mcagh.gov.ky. Staff from the Department of Children and Family Services, along with other partner agencies, will also be discussing children's issue on Radio Cayman and the Cayman Islands Government TV Channel 20 every Monday and Tuesday during the month of May. The full calendar of events will be published in the Cayman Islands Compass on Friday, 26th of April. I encourage everyone to participate in the various activities planned for the month of May. Let's all make a concerted effort to celebrate and cherish the children of these islands every day of every month, all year round. I also have a calendar here, which I will distribute, of the Child Month 2013. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now my colleague, Minister Glidden, is going to give the report from his ministry.
Thank you, Minister Anglin. Just want to also express thanks to the press again, and to the listening audience. The only real area that I wanted to give some clarity on in regards to my ministry was the area of the increases to the licensing fees that has been discussed in regards to local boats. So the boat licensing, there was an increase. You all will remember, as a part of the new revenue measures, it was passed in August, I think, of 2012. There was an increase. Upon taking responsibility for the ministry in December, it was brought to my attention that there was an error, because the intention was never meant to include local operators and business or commercial vessels. And so I announced that we'd given instructions. We took the paper to Cabinet to actually give drafting instructions. I've been informed that the Port Authority is still charging the increased fees. The reason why the Port Authority is still charging the fees is because we're waiting, while having given legal instructions to drafting to make the required amendments so that the local vessels would be exempted, though those amendments have not yet been gazetted. So the Port Authority is doing what they're supposed to do, which is follow the law. The commitment that we have made is that anyone who has paid additional fees, which would have been inadvertently charged, but in accordance with the legislation that was passed, will be entitled to a refund of those fees. Obviously, it depends on when the license had to be renewed as to when they're going in, but up until this point in time, the local operators are still having to pay the increased fees, and we just wanted to acknowledge that while the government has made the decision, while government has given drafted instructions, in the absence of the actual gazette of the change of the law, the Port Authority has no choice but to collect the fees, and instructions have been given that the change will be retroactive, so that the fees will actually, the individuals who have paid those fees to date will be entitled to a refund. So there's been some confusion, because obviously the Port Authority is still charging, and the question is if we've given instructions, but obviously it's a part of the process. We give instructions to actually get drafting legislation changed, and until that legislation has been changed, the Port Authority still has to follow the law. So we wanted to make sure that the operators knew that instructions were coming, and that they won't be disadvantaged in any way financially. While we understand there's a strain and on unexpected strain. We've worked quickly to address that and actually have given instructions, but they haven't been implemented as yet. I think that was all it is. All there was from my specific areas of responsibility. There's ongoing work with the projects, the infrastructure projects that we're working on. The ministry is continuing moving forward with the procurement exercise of both the port, the airport. Our understanding is that tourism is still doing well. We're looking at new opportunities, specifically some new opportunities to partner with some private sector individuals using Cuba as a gateway to Cayman. And so hopefully in the very near future we'll have some exciting news to share. But I look forward to questions on the happenings within the ministry and the areas that I have constitutional responsibility for.
Thank you very much, Minister Glidden. Obviously, we will be joined in a little bit by the Honorable Premier, and we will be, when she arrives, addressing two other important matters, namely the pre-election report and the happenings in London as it relates to certain commitments surrounding our financial services industry. But until that time, at this point, we would be happy to open for questions.
Good morning, gentlemen. Wendy from Cayman News Service. My first question concerns the mortgage fund that was set up previously reportedly from money given by DAR in the For Cayman Investment Alliance. Can you update us on what's happening with that fund, like how much money's been given out, whether there's more money to be given out, are applications still coming in? And finally, can you confirm whether a committee was actually established to do it, obviously since there's been some questions about committees? I'm not sure who that would go to be honest.
Well, Wendy, I'll take a stab at it, and obviously we're going to need your indulgence to provide some of that question to us in writing, and then we'll be able to respond. But I can confirm that the committee was established to consider it, and I can confirm that there were a number of successful applicants. I can say that there were a number of frustrating cases where primary lending institutions were not cooperative in regards to ensuring the person could place an additional charge over their properties. And I think that's where the issue came down, if I remember correctly. But yes, committee was established. A number of recipients, persons were recipients. As regards to remaining funding and what's happening, if you give us that in writing, then we can get an answer to that in writing.
Mr. Glidden, sir, just a quick follow-up with regards to the licensing fees. What happens if the government changes and it's still not gazetted and there's a change in government will at that point in time? It just goes by the wayside and you're just paying, the boat owners have to pay the increased fees?
No, we expect there to be done. We have a responsibility. Obviously, those additional fees were brought in this financial year by a government of which we were a part. Right? It's acknowledged from all the statements that have been made that it was not the intention. Right? So it was an oversight on the part of the government at the time, and we've taken steps to address that, and we expect that it will be addressed prior to.
Minister Scanlon, you mentioned the MOU with CONCACAF. You mentioned some of the things that hopefully CONCACAF will bring to Cayman. What are some of the things that the government offered in return in the MOU? Can you speak to some of those things?
Well, the government hasn't specifically offered anything at this point. That's why it's an MOU, and the CONCACAF has indicated a certain, some things in terms of a few concessions that they're seeking. But the biggest or the major part from CONCACAF's perspective is about their establishment here and the way that they want that to be carried out. So obviously that's the biggest element from their perspective in the MOU. But as I said, the MOU is simply an agreement to continue discussions, has a fixed period and so on it. And obviously the government hasn't given commitments at this stage in terms of what they'll do. But obviously we're going to work from our side. I hope it continues that way for them to be able to be established here. CONCACAF is a huge organization, and to have them headquartered here in Cayman from a staff perspective alone, and then also from the media coverage and everything that goes along with it would be tremendous.
I just was with MNOUs. They say they agree they consider moving here over their headquarters, and government considers to.
Yeah, but
Why
there are some
fees?
things. There are some things like to do with work permits and various not major. We're not talking about financial concessions and that sort of thing at this point, because obviously it's just an organization to be established here, and they just want to have some security when if they need to bring specialist persons here and so on, and people that will be not necessarily permanently located here, so they want to have the ability that a person can be stationed here for 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then leave for a while and come back and have that sort of security that they will be able to have a work permit that works that way, so on. But it's not they're not draconian requirements or things that they're asking for. In fact, I think it's more incumbent on ourselves from our perspective to do some of these things to encourage them to come here, because obviously any other country in the whole CONCACAF region could be also vying for them to do the same thing.
I fear that I think some of our questions are probably going to be around the pre-election financial report, but we're going to have to wait until the Premier arrives for that. In the meantime, probably this question goes to Mr. Glidden. It is concerning, or Minister Anglin, not sure who, but this is concerning the vendors on the 7 Mile Public Beach. I understand the situation is still not sorted out. It's still a situation where some have not gotten licenses, are still waiting to find out what's going on with the paperwork, and just this state of limbo that seems ever pervasive. So I'm not sure if you can give us any update on what's happening with the vendors along the beach.
Obviously, that is an area that crosses a couple of ministries. What I can say is that we certainly established in cabinet a committee to take a look at this. We didn't feel it was something that we should just do administratively. For obvious reasons, I will have to endeavor to get more information, and certainly, Tammy, at the end of this, if you can give me whatever information you have about who doesn't have licenses, so that we can actually follow up to find if there's good reasons or if it's just really an administrative holdup. What I can say, and I think government hasn't really gotten out, from our perspective at least, some of the real issues we were having. Illegal selling of alcohol, widespread complaints of people saying their property was missing, and obviously, large quantities of what the tools that people were using for their businesses were just being left on the public beach, and the fact of the matter is, you can't just say that because you were the first person to come there that you deserve to just be allowed to do that. We have to be fair to all concerned. There would be a lot of legitimate complaints from Caymanians who would say, well, if I knew that if I went against the traditional standards that Trade and Business Licensing Board has set, which is you must have a place for your business, etc., then I would have gone and pitched tent as well. And so that's why this issue has been a bit of a vexing one. What I can say is that a part of the overall redevelopment of the public beach, we do want to, as we previously announced, really organize this in a similar way as is at Cowood Beach. I think that's a good model where people can have an open and transparent process to apply for a kiosk. I think that will go a long way to really trying to settle some of this vexing issue.
And staying in the same area, any update on the PwC report, West Bay Road, anything that you can tell us? Any updates?
Well, we're frustratingly close. This report is so close to us having all of the details just finalized. My understanding is that there's one outstanding matter for us to iron out. It's basically around language in the agreement, to be perfectly frank with you, and so it has nothing to do with about what's in, what's out. There's no, and I think that's something that's important for us to say. I don't know if we've said this clearly enough. for quite some time now, there hasn't been negotiations going on per se. What there has been is a lot of back to and fro between the sides around language and what language ought to be in and out of the agreement and those sorts of things. My understanding too is that PwC does stand ready, that once we have settled on these final pieces of language, that they would have the report very early next week so that we can finally get this out to the public. I just want to say that to the public and to yourselves as reporters, with us being in the hot seat, we want to get it out as quickly as possible as well, because we recognize there's a great need to get this out.
And once we have that report in hand, do we have a time frame as to when the rest of the strip of Westby Road to be closed will be gazetted?
Well, I'll ask my colleague, Minister Scotland, who's much more familiar with these technical aspects, to answer that.
Okay.
There is a time frame, and since you haven't looked at it for a while, Tommy, but there is a specific time frame associated with the gazetting of the closure of the remainder. I can't put my finger on that time frame now, but I can try to find it and get to you shortly. Before the end of the press conference, I'll find a number.
Is there a ballpark time frame you might know? Are we talking about months or weeks?
Let me find it exactly for you, okay? Because I learned my lesson about quoting the wrong dates and numbers in the press.
Gentlemen, should I hold off until the Premier gets here to ask questions about the pre-election financial report, or do you all want to take a stab at that now? Or?
Well, there could very well be some questions that we can answer at this stage.
Let me give this a try then, Mr. Anglin. Maybe this is for you. There appears to be that all of the principles responsible for financial management will be met by 2014-15, except for the 10% debt servicing requirement. Do you know why that is the one that's sort of outstanding beyond then, and what the reasons for that might be?
What I can say is, Brent, is that this report, and remember, I think we ought to take a step back. I mean, we could have taken the easy way out on this as the Lonely Five. I mean, we could have had a finance committee held in March when we went back to the House, and the law would have been obeyed, and we wouldn't have had to do the pre-election report. We took the brave decision that the right thing to do for the country was to follow the real spirit of the PMFL. The real spirit of the PMFL was that if you had a real robust finance committee before an election, that would have provided adequate up-to-date information to the public, and therefore you didn't have to do the pre-election report. I think it needs to be clearly stated that this is the first robust pre-election report since this law came into effect. As it relates to a number of issues within the report, what I can say to you is that we took the decision that we would only utilize the policy positions that had been taken to date to inform the report. I think all of you will know that I have had a constant mantra for the last 2 years, which is that this country needs a robust debt reduction strategy that will, in my opinion, involve us looking strategically at a number of government assets, seeing how we can get them off the books, as it were, as it relates to their debt, paying down that debt, and us being able to therefore have a significant piece of debt out. I don't think that we can continue to mess around and believe that we're going to just have this orderly payout, and we have a 2019 looming for the bond.
I wanted you to talk about that a little bit. When you say the 2019 looming, I'm not sure most people understand, but you're talking about balloon payments.
That's right.
From the bond. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Sure, Brandon, and certainly that. Thank you for that, because that I think will really cement the point as to why I keep harping on this debt reduction strategy. In 2009, when we took over the government, we had a large number of PPM projects to continue, namely this building and the school's projects. The commitment to continue those projects meant that we had to put in place a borrowing package somewhere in the order of $310 million US. The decision that was taken at the time was that though that bond would be one that would have, as you've said, a balloon payment coming 10 years hence, and that's due now 2019. We know we have not established a sinking fund. And so therefore, if you look at government's capacity to raise funds in this economy, I think we just have to be honest with the public. There isn't any real possibility that we're going to be able to have that amount of money extracted from the economy and a sinking fund to pay that off. And so what are we going to therefore do? We would have to therefore have to renegotiate that and put that as a more traditional bond issue. I don't think that that's the best use of public finances. I don't think that that's the best strategy as we try to manage debt. I think that we need to look at a number of assets, including this building, and what sort of sale leaseback arrangement that we could have through an open, transparent, public tender system, where the aim and objective would be to have this building perhaps placed in a real estate fund. This is stuff I've said I think countless times now, that Caymanians, pension plan providers can actually invest in. I think there's a real appetite out there for Caymanians and Caymanian entities to have the opportunity to more fully participate in some of government's own infrastructure projects. I don't think anyone will be surprised at the stance that I personally have taken as it relates to the Water Authority. I believe it's high time the government gets out of the utility business and again do what we do in West Bay. We've had decades in West Bay of private sector efficiently providing water. And I think, again, through a transparent process, we could have a very successful procurement of the provision of those services. Again, if we do those sorts of things, think of strategically how we need to utilize some of our assets, not compromise CIG's position in any way. It is through those sorts of moves that we are going to be able to come up with the physical cash dollars that's going to allow us to really have a real credible shot at reducing debt tangibly, so that it's manageable, so that we're not paying $30 million in interest a year as we do at present, and be able to meet the very target you're talking about. But as I said, Brent, we took a decision that outside the actual approved policies that underpinned this budget, we weren't going to presuppose any new policies. And so come May 22nd, the point that you have questioned is going to have to be one of the first policy positions a new administration will have to take up. How will we? What is it that we're going to do? I've just given you two potential solutions, but what will we do to ensure we meet that target?
I just want your reaction to, like, if I made this statement, and what would you say? I mean, however you decide to do it, whether you do it through divestment or additional borrowing if the UK allows you to, this is going to require the country to go into more debt in some form or another to pay off its debt. Do I have that right, or do you think that's not putting it correctly?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, you take let's take a financing transaction around this building. What you basically do is you're saying that for a period of time you are relieving government of being in the real estate business, for example. Is government the best owner of prime real estate in Georgetown? Does government need to be that quote-unquote prime owner? Or is a better model that, again, as an example, that you could, through a proper tender process, and I can tell you, there's many private sector people who came to government in 2009 with this solution. I think it wasn't well understood, and perhaps we can put our hands up and say we didn't properly explain it, because it was amazing to me that when I talked about this last year, I got pure positive reaction. Oh, this is a good idea, when in fact that was one of the proposals that was made in 09, 010 about what to do with this particular asset. So in that instance, Brent, what would happen is you would have a lease arrangement. And so, yes, you would have to pay certain cash monies. But because you're able to bring funds into CIG, you are able to therefore take those funds, reduce your debt, and yes, your operating expenses are going to be, would go up slightly, because those lease payments would typically be a little more than the debt repayment that it's replacing. But it's going to be pretty close in my mind. And so you're not going to have a huge difference there. But what you are able to do is the actual core government debt reduces, your ratio therefore reduces. It's a more efficient way to manage the resources.
I'm sorry if I'm just being dense, but the situation you just described is how is it different? I mean, all you're doing is just taking the debt that you have off the books. You still have to make a lease payment toward the building. You're just taking the debt off it's like an accounting trick.
No, it's not an accounting trick. It's not an accounting trick. What it is right now, if all of us in this room own the business, we either go to a developer and say, we're going to be your sole tenant. We guarantee you we're going to be your sole tenant. Build us a building. We're gonna enter an arrangement where we're gonna lease the building back from you, but you have to go take on your own debt. And it's an operating expense at that point for our company. It's not debt for our company. We're not the prime debt holder. We're not the prime owner of record at that point in time. But you've secured the contract in such a way that your home is your home. And these transactions happen all the time. I mean, that is, as I said, that is one potential solution. There's going to be 18 mines that's going to weigh in on this May 22nd, and I don't want to get hung up on any one. That's just my personal offering of one of the ways in which you can manage your affairs in terms of how you can bring that number down.
Just a quick follow. I mean, if government sells off all its profitable assets, where do we stand in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, when we're in this financial crisis? Hopefully not again, but if it does occur.
What profitable assets?
Profitable asset.
Pardon me?
What profitable
You're
assets?
talking about the water authority. It's a profitable business.
We don't get a big dividend from the water authority at present.
But if we sell it, we don't own that anymore, and that is a profitable asset for us.
No, a profitable asset, Jay, is one that you operate and you can get a significant dividend from. Having an asset that sits outside central government and you don't collect any significant profit from, how can you say that's a profitable asset?
What do you get? What do we get from the water authority now?
I'll have to ask the Premier when she comes, but the last time I checked, it was a few $100,000 was basically the dividend that we got. And just to say, Jay, here's one thing you got to recognize, is that if you privatize in this area, and then let's be very clear, this isn't something new and creative around globally. You find most governments have woken up and recognized that being in utilities, railways, and telecoms, is not the place for government. Deregulation and getting government out of those lines of businesses have happened over many decades in the vast majority of modern countries, and they've benefited because you get a better service, a more efficient service being provided by the private sector. And in this instance, remember that one of the things that CIG would naturally would happen is that if a future government made that decision, you would charge a royalty, just like right now we charge a royalty to Cayman Water Company, who provides water in the District of West Bay.
So Jay, just because it's important, and there's a lot of people that take the same approach that you have taken. So it's a profitable asset in terms of government because it's not costing us money. But is it actually recognizing the revenue that could be recognized if it was privatized? So if you use that example, there was a proposal so assume that we get $1 million a year from the water authority currently, all right? And there was a proposal, and it's important when we talk about disposing of assets and profitable assets, that we were talking about a lease agreement, all right? So the government was saying, you lease it for 25 years. You get an upfront payment of, I think one of the proposals was $50 million?
50 US.
$50 million US, and you get a royalty payment of $3 million a year for 25 years. All right? So you end up in 25 years with a payment of $125 million, and you concentrate on regulating that. Now, to equal that payment, we need to be getting, when you make it profitable, to counterbalance that, we need to be getting a royalty from them or a payment from them of some $5 million a year. All right? We've never gotten that money as a return. Now, we may look that they continue to invest and they might do new buildings, or they might buy new equipment, or they might do whatever, right? So you're saying it doesn't cost government money. But when we have this concern about profitable assets, the question that government needs to have, are they getting a return on the investment, the maximum return that they could get in the way that they're managing that asset as it stands now? And we just want to make sure that when we had the proposal for the disposal, right, it was always for a lease.
Absolutely.
Right? So it wouldn't, in answer to your question, what happens in 25 years? In 25 years, at the end of that lease, the government either decides that they want to continue with that lease arrangement, or now they want to take it over and run the asset, because they may feel that it's now in a place that they can run it and make more than the $5 million a year in profit. But we're just using examples.
No, I understand, but not to beleaguer the point, because I know other media want to ask questions, but you say that if it's privatized, they'll run it more efficiently and better, which probably means an increase in fees, which is a cost of living increase to the people of Cayman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what the difference between what Cayman Water and the Water Authority charges, because I don't have properties in both districts that they charge in, but are we undercharging, or is it a vast service to the people of the community? Because it's the Water Authority, because it's government? That's something else you have to look at, I guess, as well, or consider.
It is something you have to consider. And there's a question as it stands right now, because government would have to stay in the regulatory business, right? They would have to remain as a regulator. And as the regulator, they would have to make sure that you have a method and a process in place which allows you to regulate those potential increases, right? And so that assessment will have to be done. All we're saying, and we got into a discussion as to what does government do in terms of the finances in trying to control its debt. And we're saying that the next administration, whoever that may be, will have to make decisions around the way to best utilize its assets. All right, and those were two examples that my colleague gave.
Right, and Jay, I think this country is desperate for people who are going to make tough choices and not just simply expect we're going to continue doing what we've done last year and get a very different result next year, and that's not going to happen. And the last point is not to belabor this particular one, but just to say that the unsolicited offer that we were talking about was actually from the Cayman Water Company. This isn't some outside company no one knows about that's going to come in and destroy an industry. This is an entity we know, an entity we've trusted, provides our water in West Bay for many years, does a fantastic job, and they were looking on, and actually there was a model where we were going to have rates, very, very stable, and a very, in my mind, a process around which any increases would have been minimal at best in terms of the impact, and it would have been, as Glenn has said, as Mr. Glidden has said, properly regulated.
And Jay, I just want to pick up on the point that the other option may very well be to take that model to look to see exactly what improvements could be made at the Water Authority, and look at a more efficient operation as well. All right. If there is that difference of not collecting or not getting what it appears that you could get if you leased it to the private sector, then the question is it not making the money? Are they making the money and spending it on something else? Can you operate more efficiently? But basically what you're looking at is the revenue supplied to the shareholder, being the Cayman Islands government, and they have a responsibility to their shareholders to ensure, the people that manage that, to ensure that they're getting the best return on that investment. And that's what we're going to have to do.
I was going to say whether I didn't know whether Madam Premier was going to do her statement or whether I should ask. My question relates to the budget report and the 30 million difference between the predicted and the expected. So perhaps I presume Madam Premier will include it in a statement, hopefully.
Morning. Morning all. Just want to give my apologies. I was in Easton at the opening and commissioning of the Doppler radar, which, by the way, we've named the Colonel Gomez Doppler radar for many obvious reasons, and there's a press release to that effect, so I won't use this forum to do that. Just by way of naming, yesterday we had the good fortune of finally opening the MRCU building, long awaited, and I'm sure the staff there, Dr. Peters, quite happy. We named the larger building, the Dr. Petrie building, William Petrie building, and the Ann Silver building after a long-serving staff, Janet Macmillan, who has over 40 years at that department. There are a number of things I wanted to deal with this morning, and hopefully by way of closure, I want to just take a quick minute to follow through. We had, I think, for 2 consecutive press briefings referred to the church, and there had been some questions. I am now in receipt of the check from the Red Bay Church of God Holiness. We've got confirmation that the Hillside Chapel, Pastor Audley Scott, has returned his, I didn't have an opportunity to check with the finance people, see whether they have received it, but he confirmed that he sent it. The Red Bay check was hand-delivered back, and there was a letter that accompanied it. I'm going to beg your indulgence to read it as I did with Pastor Audley's. It says, "Dear Honourable Premier, on behalf of the leadership, members and congregation of the Red Bay Church of God Holiness and the express guidance of the Blessed Holy Spirit, we sincerely thank you for the recent financial assistance from the Nation Building Fund. As you are aware, financial assistance was requested from the Nation Building Fund in a letter from the church dated 5th May 2012 and approved under the former Premier, Honourable McKeever Bush, your office only being involved with the delivery thereof. We are mindful of other churches receiving grants from this fund presented by other honourable ministers of government. However, none seemingly being brutally attacked and maligned by the media as the Red Bay Church of God Holiness. Seemingly, having errors presented by you has been viewed as a means of buying votes in the upcoming election. How unfortunate. Therefore, as a result of these attacks on the church, despite our genuine needs of the funds, and to avoid having your actions in the distribution of these funds further questioned and allegations of your intent further challenged, the church has made the decision to not accept the funds. The check received in this regard is attached. We at Red Bay Church of God Holiness beg to humbly apologize under God for these severe attacks on your integrity, leadership, and humble spirit. Our ardent prayers for all Christians is, end quote, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trials which is to try you, as though some strange thing has happened unto you. But rejoice inasmuch as you are partakers of Christ's suffering. The time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God." 1 Peter 4, 12-19. May the body of Christ be mindful of our mandate under God to pray for all men and leaders. 1 Timothy 2, 1-6. Leader of this great nation under God for such a time as this, if for Christ you have earnestly striven and have tried all his will to obey, it will enhance all the beauty of heaven when you've gone the last mile of the way. May the faithfulness of God and favor ever lead, protect, and guide you to the goal of his intended purpose. Yours faithfully, signed by Pastor Anna Gracia Smith Joseph, Senior Pastor, and Pastor John Kim Evans Jr., Assistant Pastor. I also wish to report this morning on a separate matter. The Cayman Islands made a decision to send a letter to the Prime Minister, which I got off early, and I mean early this morning, to the UK. I'm going to, with your indulgence, just read this in the spirit of transparency. Our government committed when we took office back in December that we would be a transparent government, and we just want to report that the letter has been received by 10 Downing Street, and you're the first to hear of the letter, perhaps even before the UK press would have heard it. Dear Prime Minister, I write regarding the June G8 Summit and European Council meeting of the 22nd of May in respect of the support that the Cayman Islands can give to the UK in carrying out its G8 agenda to tackle tax evasion and promote transparency. Tackling tax evasion and fraud is rightly a global priority, necessary to protect the integrity of public revenues, the confidence of taxpayers in the fairness and effectiveness of their tax systems, and ultimately increase public confidence in open global capital markets. The government of the Cayman Islands recognizes that the modern, cooperative, and transparent jurisdiction is one that uses automatic exchange of information mechanisms and multilateral approaches in tax matters. and that demonstrates effectiveness in the implementation of these measures. Indeed, our strategy for the development of our financial services industry, and my Deputy Premier will speak to that specific area in short order. On the 15th of March 2013, my Minister for Financial Services announced our commitment to enter into FACTA Model 1, intergovernmental agreement with the United States for the automatic exchange of tax information, together with a parallel agreement with the UK to the same timetable. We are well advanced in our discussions with both the United States and the UK, and we expect to conclude the relevant agreements quickly. We look forward to working with our partners to effectively implement these measures. We recognize that FACTA, when coupled with rapid developments in technology, provides a unique opportunity to develop the new global standard of multilateral automatic change of tax information as the most effective way to tackle tax evasion. Since 2005, the Cayman Islands has engaged in automatic exchange of tax information with all EU member states for the purposes of the EU Savings Directive. We are committed to build on this experience by joining the pilot multilateral automatic exchange of tax information announced recently by the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. We welcome these efforts to promote an effective global mechanism for automatic exchange of information for tax purposes, in which all jurisdictions participate, and where a common approach will not only ensure efficiencies of cost and resources, but will also avoid the risk of multiple competing standards. Accordingly, we would call on other jurisdictions to commit to this initiative, which will take us to a new level of tax transparency and remove hiding places for those who would seek to evade tax and dodge their responsibilities. As demonstrated in our engaged and proactive approach to the work of the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, we welcome the opportunity to be part of the pilot program and would emphasize our expectation to be fully engaged in discussions on its development and implementation. In line with the revised FACTA recommendations, the recently issued methodology for assessing compliance and the standards of effectiveness, the Cayman Islands is committed to reviewing its legal and regulatory framework, including conducting a national threat assessment. We will produce an action plan for the strengthening of our regime, including the area of transparency of beneficial ownership. The Cayman Islands has always taken a leading role in fighting against money laundering, terrorist financing, and all forms of financial crime, as is evidenced by consistent compliance with the standards. Accordingly, we are committed and determined to remain at the forefront of jurisdictions in respect of information and enforcement of rules such as beneficial ownership. Given the significant commitments we have expressed in this letter, it is indeed our sincere hope that the Cayman Islands will receive its fair share of recognition from Her Majesty's government. I have asked my officials to continue their direct engagement with your Treasury officials to ensure that the global community receives the clear message that both our governments are in the forefront of tackling tax evasion and implementing transparency. Furthermore, in the spirit of partnership, as was set out in the 2012 White Paper on the Overseas Territories, we look forward to the UK's elected as well as non-elected officials publicly recognizing the fact that we have advanced the level of commitments in the Cayman Islands to the global standard. I am copying this letter to David Gauck, MP, the Exchequer Secretary of the Treasury, and Mark Simmons, MP, who is currently in Bermuda, the Parliamentary Under Secretary of the State of the FCO, and it was signed off as customary. Yours sincerely, Juliana, on behalf of the Cayman Islands government. The Honourable Deputy Premier will perhaps elucidate on the necessity and the importance of this move in Cayman being the first out of the gates, as it were, and the commitment we have to our financial services industry in this jurisdiction and across the globe with the legitimate expectations that they have. You would have also noted that if you're online, and I'm sure you all get on quite rapidly, that yesterday we did in fact meet the deadline, a statutory deadline for the pre-election report. I've asked my financial secretary to be on standby in the event there were questions that needed to be answered, as I'm sure they would be. It's on the website for all to read. There is a executive summary, of course, that's there. You will note that it was also signed off by myself and my deputy, which is in accordance to the local legislation. It's before it would have been the financial sector, but that's not now in accordance with the changes under the relevant legislation. I just want to say that in accordance to Section 26 of the Public Management and Finance Law 2012 revision, the pre-election economic financial update, as I said, has been now released for public consumption. My statements will include the economic and fiscal outlook for the remainder of 2012-13 fiscal year and include forecasts for the next 2 financial years, which is a statutory requirement. First, I'll deal with the economic update and associated forecast. The economic outlook forecasts growth of 1.8% for the remainder of the current fiscal year, which ends on the 30th of June 2013. After that, the economy is expected to grow at an average rate of 2.4% until 2015. Inflation is expected to increase from 1.7 in June 2013 to 2.3 in June 2015. Over the corresponding period, the unemployment rate is estimated to fall, settling to 5.7 by June 2015. The government's operating surplus under the financial update and forecast is forecasted to be $51.1 million at 30th June 2013. This is $31.2 million less than the $82.3 million originally budgeted. However, the operating surplus is forecast to improve to $118.1 million for 2013-14 fiscal year and $135.8 million for the 2014-15 period. Core government is expected to have a closing bank account balances totaling at $99.7 million for the fiscal year ending 30th June 2013. This amount is $20 million less than the $119.7 million shown in the original 2012-13 budget. Thereafter, the closing bank account balances are forecast to be $166.3 million at the end of the fiscal year 2013-14 and $250.4 million at the end of the fiscal year 2014-15. For the entire public sector, core government, statutory authorities, government-owned companies, the closing bank balances for fiscal year 2012-13 are forecast to be $157.8 million. This amount is $25.1 million less than the $182.9 million shown in the 2012-13 budget. For fiscal years 2013-14 and 14-15, the entire public sector closing bank balances are forecast to increase to $221.2 million and $303.7 million respectively. Core government debt is forecast to be $575.4 million at the end of the fiscal year 2012-13. This amount is expected to further decrease to $549 million at the end of 2013-14 and $523.7 at the end of the fiscal year 2014-15 as the government continues to make repayments on existing debts. The forecast assumes no new borrowings during the forecast period, and this confirms to the 3-year plan agreed with the FCO. For the entire public sector, the closing debt for 2012-13 is forecast to be $717.9 million. Thereafter, this balance is forecast to decrease to $677.6 million at the end of 2013-14 and $638.8 million at the end of 2014-15. The government is forecast to be in full compliance with the principles of responsible financial management relating to net operating surplus and net worth throughout the forecast period. Compliance with the principles that require a debt ratio of less than 80% is forecast to be achieved in the years 2013-14, 2014-15. The cash reserve requirement, that is more than 90 days of executive expenses, will achieve compliance in the fiscal year 2014-2015. However, compliance will not be achieved for the debt servicing ratio, which should be less than 10% of the forecast period. That concludes my report for this week, and it's a pleasure I turn it over to my Deputy Premier to further elucidate on the financial services impact of the letter we just wrote last night.
Certainly, and thank you very much, Madam Premier. In fact, this Cayman's commitment to the G5 pilot is something that we have had a lot of conversation with Cayman Finance around, and certainly we are hopeful that as we move forward over the next couple of days, that Cayman Finance and our government jointly will continue to demonstrate clearly to the public why this was in Cayman's best interest, and I'm confident that all and sundry in the industry will also recognize why moving in this vein and this direction was most appropriate. It is a fact that the global landscape in taxation is changing at an unprecedented pace. The greater alignment of tax-related initiatives is evident in the high-level communiques from the G20 and the G8, and these messages are moving down through a hierarchy of international bodies, government, industry, and quite importantly, the global public. This is why it is so important for us that with the latest commitments to the G5 pilot on multilateral automatic exchange of tax information, that the UK government publicly acknowledge our efforts. As our local media know, I announced on the 15th of March that Cayman would pursue a Model 1 intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, with the United States for the implementation of FATCA, and said that the decision also would apply to similar arrangements with the UK. The Honourable Premier is absolutely correct that this announcement has not been carried in the UK media. UK media also has not acknowledged that for more than a decade, Cayman has been actively involved in the OECD's works on standards for the exchange of information for tax purposes. In 2000, we made an advanced commitment to the international bodies, and today we sit as a member of both the steering group and the peer review group of the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes of the OECD. Cayman has also contributed significantly to the Global Forum's work by providing assessors for peer reviews, hosting a peer review group meeting in Grand Cayman in 2011, and providing training at Gloron Forum seminars. I have said before that the modern cooperative and transparent jurisdiction will be one that uses automatic exchange of information mechanisms and multilateral approaches in tax matters, and that demonstrates effectiveness in the implementation of these measures. Cayman has time and again shown our commitment to global cooperation, and it is past time for our country to receive the global recognition that it deserves for these efforts. And I can also say that we, in this matter, this was one in which not only did we have a high-level negotiation in London to come up with how it was we were going to move forward and demonstrate a commitment to participate in a commitment for further negotiation, but also we were lockstep with the private sector. In fact, Cayman Finance is represented in London at present, so this isn't just a government group doing this work. It is also important that we not only trumpet locally as news, as media, as government, the great and stalwart achievements, but we also continue to demand of our peers and our equals in the United Kingdom in particular that this due recognition be given. The fact of the matter is, whilst the UK media may not have picked up a lot of what has happened, we also had UK politicians who also, in my mind, did not pay due regard to the efforts that the Cayman Islands has made. And from that perspective, we will continue to bat our corner and ensure that the world knows the outstanding work and achievements that we've made over the last 2+ decades, that these efforts have been underway. And so I'm happy that we have reached this far, and I'm happy that we are indeed lockstep with Cayman Finance on this matter.
Thank you. And I guess just out of the abundance of caution, we want to just emphasize that the Cayman Islands government was not forced into this position as prudent and responsible players within this global market. We thought it was in the best interest of Cayman, and that was the sole reason that we decided that we would get this letter, knowing that there would be a meeting on the 22nd of May to the Prime Minister and the UK, and we did that earlier this morning, and we have, as I said, received confirmation that it has been received at 10 Downing Street.
Thank you. Madam Premier, can I revert back to what I asked earlier, which was there is a little bit of a difference between the original forecast budget surplus of about 81+ million, and it's coming in about 50. So can you explain if there's any problems about that 30 million, whether the UK has made any comment?
To the best of my knowledge, Wendy, the UK have not made comment. I certainly haven't seen it. I was with my finance team very late last night. And although I wasn't with them this morning, they have the reputation of being very expeditious. So I am fairly confident that they have not communicated. Otherwise, they would have indicated. I have, and if I could call them up by way of Chalo sitting, Ms. Sonia and the FS, if they could come and respond to your question about the 30 million variance to give the explanation of where we're at that point. I'd be most grateful. Could pass the roving mic to them, please.
We make them go.
Go ahead.
Madam Premier?
Yes, go ahead.
It's on.
Okay, thanks. I think the question was the difference in the budgeted revenue versus what we're forecasting now, and whether that presented an issue to the Foreign Commonwealth Office. I think that was the question. And I think the response to that I would give is that certainly the UK is aware of this difference. The economic advisor, Mr. Holmwood, Richard Holmwood, is a member of the Budget Delivery Committee, and we have regular meetings. The Budget Delivery Committee is a committee that's chaired by the Deputy Governor, and we have some chief officers such as Ms. Sonia McLaughlin, Dax Bastillo, some external advisors on the committee, Mr. Dan Scott, Mr. Woody Foster. Mr. Holmwood is a member of that committee, and we have been sharing these figures with him on a monthly basis, so he's aware of the position. In terms of, I think the Honourable Premier may have spoken about getting back on track. When you look deeper into the document that was gazetted last night, you will find the comment that in order to get back on track with that trajectory, we will need to take further actions in the future years to get back on track. But there's no immediate crisis arising from these figures. The UK is well aware of the position.
Thanks. And the Minister responsible for Financial Services, I think, wants to speak to the political effect of that.
Sure, and I think when they in your first iteration of this question, and I'm sure you're going to get back to it, you specifically targeted the $30 million shortfall. as a question. And basically, as was announced during the budget meeting last year, there was an intention of the government to introduce a regime around corporate governance. Basically, the former Premier, Mr. Bush, had reached out to the private sector, in particular a number of individuals in that industry, and one individual stepped up, and that individual put together a what I would describe certainly as in content a robust framework around corporate governance. However, and that number was put in the budget, and it was put in the budget in terms of its total, somewhere around, I think it was $33 million, when you added all of the elements up. What unfortunately transpired between then and now was a number of things. Firstly, that package was not one that had been endorsed by the industry. That package also was one that had not been shared with the wider private sector. And third, and equally important, Seymour came to the table and stated categorically that it was not in a position to offer up the resources to be able to offer the type of support such a regulatory regime would need if it was going to operate. The other element of it that was of critical importance, because of the fact that an individual put in a lot of diligent work and did an outstanding job from our perspective at coming up with a proposed framework, but because it was hurried and rushed by nature, because they were asked to put something together that could be put in a budget. Not only was consultation not carried out locally, but it wasn't carried out internationally either. And one of the key tenets around the proposal was that hedge funds were going to have to make some fundamental shifts around how their board would look. And everybody acknowledged that such a move could never have been implemented in year one. In other words, you would have to give some sort of transitional provision so that people will have an opportunity to be able to reorganize their board if that proposal winds up being the one that survives. What the government has done and what we are committed to doing, there is a working group that is continuing to not only look at this proposal, but to look at some other work that has been done in the area of corporate governance over the last few years. Seymour has carried out a survey of the industry, and that survey has not only been to professional directors, it's been to fund promoters, attorneys, accountants, and many people off island. Whilst the results of that survey is not something that is a matter of public record as yet, what I can say is that certainly from the informal initial feedback that I received this week, it is clear that all and sundry recognize that there has to be a new regime around new regulatory regime around directorships, in particular surrounding the hedge fund industry. I think everyone recognizes that this potentially will be an area that the Cayman Islands could receive significant criticism over the next few years if we don't put a regime in place to ensure that is of high standard. So the idea is, and what we have said is, and I said this a little earlier, policy positions that were taken to underpin this negotiated position remain in these projections. And so I want to be very, very clear from our perspective, the clear expectation is that working group will continue to work, and that we will hopefully be able to have a position in place shortly after a new government takes office, so that they can see that work, tweak if necessary, but certainly continue down this line because it forms a part of a 4-year negotiated position. And I'm confident that all parties who have been involved in this, the individuals who have already, put forward a proposal. I think there's at least one counter proposal with some tweaks. Again, harnessing all of those good ideas is crucially important because it is one of the biggest growth areas for Cayman. It poses significant risk if not regulated properly, but at the same time, everyone recognizes that if you do something and do it smartly, there is significant government revenues that can be raised because we're going to have to pay for that regulatory regime. But more importantly, the net return to government is going to be able to fund the cash projections or underpin the cash projections that's included in years 2, 3, and 4 of the 4-year plan.
Thanks, Ralston. I'm just going to ask if I could be excused. I have a public meeting in my constituency tonight. I don't have the pleasure of driving there. I have to fly, and those of you who go to the RAC, you take what flights you get. I should have been checked in at 1 o'clock, but I wanted to come to give the briefing. If there are any questions that you didn't get to ask, feel free to either send them in to me or ask them when I'm back here on Thursday. Thank you for your kind understanding. My deputy will take over. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Actually, I've got a question that refers to the church building fund, which doesn't actually involve the Premier. It's more about the other churches that were on the list. We received the Freedom of Information document recently that gave the details of the churches that received from the Nation Building Fund this year. Can any of you say whether you attend any of those churches on that list?
Yeah, I do. I can say I attend a Seventh-day Adventist church.
Miss Ledger, I don't mean to be funny, but since you have that information, if you provide it to me, I can confirm because I don't know which churches have received. I don't think the church I attend received, which is the Bosenby Presbyterian Church. I'm 99.9% sure, but I don't want to sit here and say no. I don't know which churches are on the list.
I don't know which churches on that list received. I can say before someone else finds information and comes back and says that it's the only church that has a purchase agreement with the government, that the church that I attend received funds from the Ministry of Youth for the Savannah After School program, which is a joint initiative between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Youth, and it has received funding for several years now for a very vibrant after-school program which supports youth in the community.
And just
But
to say,
as I'm not aware of it receiving any funds from the Nation Building Fund.
right, and just to say, the Ministry of Youth has had a long-standing commitment and relationship with a number of other churches that provide after-school care, namely the John Gray Memorial Church in my district is probably the most long-standing program. More recently, the Church of God Chapel, or better known, if I got that name wrong, it's Pastor Stanwick Miles' church, also receives a grant for after school, and other institutions also receive similar grants.
Quick question to follow that with the $150,000 that was just returned. Does that just go to general revenues, or is it back into the Nation Building Fund? What happens to that money that was returned?
Before you answer that, I think a lot of churches request this fund for after-school programs, etc., which is very important. I don't think that anyone would have a problem with after-school programs being funded, whether we attend the church or not. A lot of the activity that actually goes on in the churches, we don't exactly know when the elders or the members of the church want to request funds or what they do. We're not elders of the church. My church has requested funds, and I don't think they've received any funds as yet. But if they did, it would have been for after-school programs.
And well, before I ask my question, I guess Jay wants an answer to his question. What happens with the money when it is returned? Does it go back to the Nation Building Fund or into a different account?
Well, at this stage, I mean, it would have to go back as unspent money in the Nation Building Fund. But just to say, Jay, because I want to make sure that we're clear on this, even though we budget and budgets are lined up in a specific way, overall there is an operating account for CIG, right? So it's not like there's all these different pots just sitting out there with loads of cash. All right, Jay.
Actually,
Quick,
there's
Jay,
another
quick
fund. There's
business.
what's the
Asset
fund for?
foreclosure.
Yeah, asset forfeiture. There's a few funds.
There's a few funds.
I fear that our time has gone on by, and we will be drawing to a close very soon. I have one question. Any one of you can answer it. As a team, the People's National Alliance, you've held your first public meetings in Bordentown and West Bay, respectively, and a lot of information has come to light from those meetings. Information concerning the port. Mr. Glidden, you've talked at length about some of the going-ons over the last couple of years as it pertains to the port. I guess my question is, why are we only getting this information now? Because it's election season? Why was this information not forthcoming beforehand?
Let me just say one thing, and then my colleague, because I think sometimes someone independent needs to also give a little perspective. Information can't be forthcoming if information is not available. Right? I've said this a few times. I've answered the question. I think it was Brent that asked this question of us when this story first broke. Cabinet did not approve or see the framework agreement with Czech or China Harbor Engineering Company that was signed by Mr. McKeever Bush. We did not approve it. We did not see it, and therefore what I don't know about, what we don't know about, can't come to light. And so Mr. Glidden can go over again how this came to light, but it only came to light, and he only received it recently.
I wasn't even specifically talking about the Czech agreement itself, but the stuff before that. The falling out and the text messages and the this, that, and the other. All of the stuff that preamble to the Czech agreement.
Well, I think that maybe we need to put it in context. I think there's a question. And I guess maybe me and Wendy were having a discussion before. When I was negotiating the DECO deal, we had regular press briefings, right? We had a press briefing at the Marriott, and we invited all the stakeholders and all the press, and we were there. When that agreement stopped, we had a joint press conference that was made with government and DECO. That was the first 16 months of our term, okay? Then we had again press briefings on the GLF deal and all the negotiations as we went there, which was a 4-month process. And at that stage, we had a very clear and obvious separation that the press was aware of to say that I was no longer negotiating that agreement or the agreement on the port, and we were moving forward. We ended up taking over, I ended up getting responsibility for the Ministry of Tourism in December, and we started with press briefings. And immediately at the press briefings, the first thing I said was that we have tried to find, there was questions as to what is the Czech information. We have said we're trying to determine what information is there, what we've paid for from GLF. So we clearly explained that we were trying to get that information time and time again. The information was received on a Thursday, the Thursday prior to Good Friday. On a Tuesday after Easter Monday, individuals who had received that document were on the radio, and they asked me to call, and I called the radio station to give that information at that point in time. So there was no period in time that I could have provided that information before. Hopefully, in that area of specific, when they also asked the question, is there anything else out there that we don't know about? And I thought Minister Anglin made it very clear. We hope that there's not, but obviously we wouldn't know, all right? So the commitment is, as soon as we've been able to get that information, we've been willing to discuss it. We've been willing to put, from our perspective, what we see as the challenges with that. We've been able to move forward with the process that was not followed, and we've also given a clear indication to the press on numerous occasions to the process that is now being followed. There is stuff that's coming out if you ask the question, there's stuff coming out with another area of my responsibility, which is the Airports Authority, right? And we've seen issues there. Again, that's a management issue that is responsible from the board's perspective, right? And so from a government, we can give policy, we can give advice and directives, which we have done, right? But those issues, again, are at a board level and not decisions that we are making at a policy level in cabinet. So hopefully that explains.
I just want to add as well to what my colleague, the Deputy Premier, said, that as far as the check agreement, and as my colleague, the Minister Glidden, said, I saw that at the same time he saw it somewhere around Good Friday when it was leaked, and I certainly wasn't in the party or had any knowledge of the check agreement that had been signed by the Premier before that. Indeed, there was some emails read this week on the radio by the member from East End, an email chain in which the whole discussion was happening between ourselves as a caucus with the then Premier about the termination of the GLF deal and him moving towards check. And when the Minister for Tourism, the now Minister for Tourism, recommended that we stick with the GLF deal, I concurred with that in an email that I sent, saying I certainly am inclined to agree with the position that he's taken, and that was when the then Premier took the decision about going with check, and who wouldn't support him, he would resign, and so on. So it was very clear from then that I was in support of continuing with the GLF deal from the time that he went with check. As my cabinet colleague for the 4 years has said, we had no knowledge, no sight of that agreement at all. Mr. Elio had been appointed to negotiate on behalf of the government, from a cabinet appointment. Otherwise than that, we saw very little as far as the check agreement. What I did say publicly as well when that agreement was leaked, that I would adamantly stated that I would not have been in support of that cabinet of that deal coming to cabinet. I certainly would not have supported that deal had it come to cabinet, and it certainly didn't.
I just also want to follow up, I guess, with, I think for some, I think there was a question as well as in regards to, well, why not the emails or why not the disagreement? For some reason, I think that it gets lost on individuals that while we're here as a collective team, while we're a group of 9, we're all individuals who have independent minds, and we're going to disagree, right? So when we have emails that show a disagreement, there's no need at that stage to decide we're going to start showing those emails or sharing those emails. We deal with those disagreements, or we try to deal with those agreements in a responsible manner as adults who disagree do. And so we're going to have a discussion, and collectively, I can say to you that within either yesterday or the day before, we're spending less time together. I had some disagreements with my colleagues here. We disagree on issues and we work them out, and we get to the point of saying this is the way we're going through. So to suggest that because there was a disagreement that has come forward. Now, when the agreement got leaked, even with the fact that I recommended GLF, you will remember that all through the discussions, I had nothing to say about that. Because as far as I was concerned, as a group, a decision was made, right? And my position was, it was there. Sure, I could have stood up at that point and said, oh no, I sent the email saying that I recommended it. What is GLF? I mean, that wasn't the responsible thing to do. Now, when that email somehow surfaces and someone finds it and they ask me if that's my position, I said, yeah, that is my position. I've made that position clear. There's no secret that this is what I supported. But to have to try to prove that in some way by undermining or showing someone or giving them the evidence of that, that's not exercise that we feel should have been or the most appropriate way to handle it as a responsible. I can say, and I know my colleagues will agree, that we disagree. We disagree regularly.
That's why we're strong, independent thinkers. We're not machines or robots.
The independent road again. And
we certainly will vigorously debate matters internally and try to build a consensus. And so come May 22nd, this general election, the public will need to look very carefully at all persons seeking office and ensure that the persons are strong individual persons who put Cayman first but are able to work together.
Gentlemen, it sounds like what you're describing, you're giving the impression that government was being run, for want of a better word, like a semi-dictatorship. Is this the case? Is this what you're saying now? Is this how you feel about the last 4 years of the administration under which you all worked?
Tommy, let me
3.5
just
years?
say, if you use the example of the check agreement, okay, I can't see how you would say that it's being run as a semi-dictatorship, because, like I said before, after the then councillor was negotiating with the JLF deal, and the then premier decided to go with check. At that point, he was possibly working on his own, but certainly not dictating to us, because, like I said, it never came back. It never once surfaced in cabinet for us to approve the deal on behalf of the entire government. So maybe, and working in your ministry and negotiating something which then has to come to cabinet, that's not unheard of. That's not unheard of, but it certainly didn't get by. If it had gotten by cabinet and we approved it, then I would agree to your point about being a semi-dictatorship, or in fact a dictatorship. But as we said before, that agreement never came to cabinet for us to approve and go forward with the agreement as it was structured.
Anyone wants to respond to that? Is that the impression that you're giving?
Tommy, you can take it as you want. I think the point that Minister Scotland is making is that if the answer you're getting is that decisions were made on behalf of the government without other members knowing.
You're asserting that major documents were hidden from cabinet.
Yeah, but a decision wasn't made, because a decision to go to Chinese Harbour Engineering Company would certainly have had to been approved in the cabinet of the Cayman Islands. It was not. No, that was a framework agreement.
Right, and I think
So an agreement signed outside of the cabinet for a project that size certainly could not have been honored in the Cayman Islands without the stamp and approval of the cabinet of the Cayman Islands, and it had not come back here. Just like I just gave you an example this morning of an MOU that was approved in cabinet. Certainly, the final agreement for that is not a valid agreement if I decide to go in the back room and negotiate that with CONCACAF and then sign on behalf of government. That has to come back to the cabinet, and that's
Right.
exactly what I said about the check agreement. And it never surfaced as a cabinet paper at any time for us to look at and approve.
Can I just clarify something though?
So
With
when
this?
can I just put, because this again we'll get into just showing how we can have differences of opinion, right? When it comes down to what is going to be a binding agreement on the government, it's going to depend on what a reasonable expectation would be by the counterparty signing. So if we have a party signing, and they're signing with the person that is representing the government as the premier, the question is, how far do they go to decide whether that person has the authority, the requisite authority that they're signing with? But you can argue that there's going to be a legitimate expectation that an entity signing an agreement with the premier of the Cayman Islands will expect that that's a binding agreement on the Cayman Islands. Now, if it gets to a court and a court decides that that was an unreasonable expectation, that the entity signing had a requirement to go further to ensure themselves that he had the authority to bind the Cayman Islands, and they didn't do that, so they were negligent in their responsibility, then that's a determination that will have to be made by a court. All right? Now, I can tell you specifically, we can give you other arrangements. And the point I said to you, if you're asking whether agreements were made and documents were signed without the knowledge and commitments made without the knowledge of the other members of cabinet, then that answer is yes.
And can I just say also, I mean, how we describe behavior, and one way that was used was dictator. What we can say, and I think it's obvious even to blind Bartimaeus, is that at a minimum you had very reckless behavior, and some may say negligent behavior, because to Minister Glidden's point, right, and this is a critical and crucial point, agreements are rarely signed off by the governor or the cabinet secretary any longer. Those authorities are devolved through our constitution to ministers. And so, ministers signing could easily be taken by any reasonable party to mean that you have that authority. And so that is why Minister Glidden has gone to seek legal advice to see if the damages clause or the break clause that's in there, for which there is some relief, up to $3 million of expenses, I believe, that's incurred, could potentially come back should China Harbor seek to exercise that provision to bite us and to have the Cayman Islands government pay monies again, just as it had to pay monies with GLF. And so, again, how we all describe it and what it sounds like, I don't really want to get into the descriptors and what it sounds like. I think the facts are the facts, and I think how you choose to describe it and how the general public chooses to, it's up to people. But all we can give is what we have found, in particular in the area that none of us knew about. And I want to make one point very, very clear so that none of this is, the country knew that there were discussions with GLF. We knew there were discussions with GLF. What we're saying is we did not know that a framework agreement with China Harbor had been signed, and we certainly didn't know anything about 81-year terms and royalty payments, etc., that were completely outside what all of us had already rejected as it related to DECO.
And to make the point clear, if we talk about comparative purposes, the ministers of cabinet that were there will say that they knew when the MOU was signed with DECO, they knew when the framework agreement was signed with DECO, they knew when the framework agreement was signed with GLF, because those agreements went to cabinet for its approval before they were signed.
Correct.
Can I just ask you then, in between, from April 2011, when the GLF deal was cancelled, up until you took office in December, that you all did not ask the Premier exactly what he was negotiating and what the parameters were, bearing in mind that an MOU had been leaked that we'd all seen soon after, bearing in mind that MOU had 49 years on it, and Mr. Glidden had already negotiated one that was much shorter. So you were already seeing, and it also said in that MOU about the $35. So you were already seeing that he was discussing an agreement that was very different from the GLF, and obviously a lot bigger and a lot more expensive. And he even says in the email between you all that's now public that he was talking about a much bigger and much more expanded project. So what are you saying is that you just left him to do those things without you asking any questions?
No,
ever
what
after.
What I've said before is that we regularly asked in caucus for updates from the then negotiator, who was Mr. Solomon. We would regularly ask for updates on the progress with the negotiation that he was underway with. We would get reports from him and occasionally from the then Premier to say that there were several things that were being worked on. One was this supposed framework agreement. One was the business plan for the business plan for the whole project, and also the final design and costing for whatever revised scope they had come up with. To date, I have never seen the business plan. I have not seen any of those items that I just mentioned, the costing or the scope and design that now is what was intended in that framework agreement. So we regularly asked for those things and got very, very, very brief and sketchy reports and saying these documents are forthcoming, but we've never received them. So it's not that we left it without asking any questions during that period. And so again, with the framework agreement having been signed unknown to us, obviously it had advanced much further than just these waiting on these documents to come out. So, but we did ask regularly during our caucuses for the information.
And let's just say, and we also have to understand, Wendy, that if in my ministry a particular activity is going on, right, and I have to update my colleagues, right? I give my colleagues an update, and so we can only rely on the information that's being given. And I can tell you, I can remember specifically surrounding the point that you're now questioning, that when these conversations came up, the answer was no. Now that's what was put in, but what is going to be in the final agreement is going to be better. I can remember 3 things that specifically were told to us was going to be better, and it was part of the negotiation, and numerous trips were being taken between Cayman Islands and Jamaica. And so one of the betters was that we were not going to exceed the term,
And the financing,
because that was key. The financing and the cost of capital was going to be better. because Czech had a greater access to cheap capital. That is, China Harbor, we were told, would not have had to go and float a specific note or bond issuance, and therefore their cost of capital was going to be better. And then the last, but by no means least, the quality of the product was going to be better because of their skills and expertise in terms of other projects that they had built. And so when these discussions were fluid, the only point that we're saying is, yes, you said that something got leaked, and certainly when that did, that obviously raised questions. Well, why is a number different? Unfortunately, Minister Scotland doesn't have time to come and hold my hand and sit at my desk and overlook my shoulder and everything's happening in the Ministry of Education. That's not the way government can or ought to work. Every minister has his responsibilities, and based on what is best for the country, and certainly what you've discussed with your colleagues and gotten agreement with your colleagues, that should be the bounds around how you work as a minister. Anytime you're going to go outside of that framework and those bounds, you should be coming back to your colleagues to ensure you have that backing.